We are on Daf Mem Beis Amid Beis, and we're about to begin some of the Gemaras regarding muktzah and some of the fascinating halachas of muktzah. So we're going to learn a halacha that pertains to one or two concepts, and the Gemara is going to have a machlokas of what the concept is. One concept is ein kli nital ela ledavar hanital. You can only take a vessel that's permissible to use, such as a bowl, a spoon, if your intent is to take it for the usage of something else that is going to be permissible to use. Such as, if I want to, I have a muktzah item. So say my muktzah item is, I don't know, shells of a nut. And those have no use anymore, so they're muktzah, they're garbage. And I want to take a spoon, which is a permissible item, in order to pick up the shells in a non-permissible way. That's going to be prohibited. I'm not allowed to take a vessel, move a vessel for the need of a muktzah item. That's concept number one. Another concept we're going to see is ein mevatlin kli mehechano. I have a non-muktzah item. If my usage of this item is going to turn it into muktzah, I'm not allowed to do so. I'm not allowed to turn something into muktzah when I use it. There are multiple reasons given. Rashi in the Mishnah says a reason based on that the concept is related to boneh, building. If I turn something into muktzah, I'm not going to be able to move it for the rest of Shabbos from where it is, essentially making it semi-permanent in its place. Another thing Rashi says is that it's sort of like breaking the vessel. I'm doing soser. I'm deconstructing the vessel if I'm turning it into a non-usable vessel. Third idea is Rashi says I'm creating a muktzah. That in and of itself is an issue. So whatever the reason is, the second concept that we're going to see in the Gemara is ein mevatlin kli mehechano. You're not allowed to destroy the usability of a vessel in muktzah. And there are going to be many applications and a machlokas on how to interpret it. But the Mishnah starts like this, and we're a Mem Beis Amid Beis again, 42b, the Mishnah towards the end of the page. Ein nosnin kli. You're not allowed to put a vessel tachas haner beneath a candle. L'kabel bes hashemen. So you have a candle. You lit candles for Shabbos. You have an oil candle, and some of the oil is dripping out, and you want to put a bowl beneath that oil to receive the oil in this cup. Now, the oil itself is going to be muktzah. There are various muktzahs that we're going to learn about in the next few pages. One is called machmas iser, a muktzah because of a prohibition. I did something, or I created something that is going to make it prohibited to be used. So there's a muktzah. If I'm not allowed to use something, there's a muktzah. Over here, this oil, I'm not allowed to use it. It's dedicated for the light. If I take some oil out of there, it's going to be extinguishing. Even the oil that drips out, it's been dedicated for a dvar iser, for the fire, and therefore it's prohibited, and I'm not allowed to take it out. Even according to Rabbi Shimon, who we said has a minimal interpretation of muktzah, does have a muktzah machmas mitzvah. Here, I've dedicated this oil for the mitzvah of Shabbos candles. And as such, I have no right to use it for anything else at this point. While the candle is lit, I have no right to use it for anything else. And as such, the oil is going to be prohibited. I'm not allowed to benefit from it. And if I put the cup, the bowl, underneath the dripping oil, I'm receiving in the cup something that is muktzah. And so whether the reason is because if I can't take a vessel only for something that I'm allowed to use, well, I'm taking the bowl over here for oil that I can't use. Or once the oil drips into this vessel, I'm no longer able to use this vessel. And it becomes muktzah like the oil in it. And as such, I have destroyed the vessel or made it permanent there. I've created a new muktzah in the vessel itself. So the Mishnah says, "Ein nosen kli tachas haner lekabel b'es Hashem," and I can't put a vessel beneath the oil to receive the oil. And if you put this vessel there prior to Shabbos to receive the oil, permissible. What's permissible? There's an interesting word here in Rashi. Rashi says, mutter lahanicha sham. You're allowed to, and lahanicha sham it can mean one or two things in Hebrew. Lahaniach can mean to place it there. I'm allowed to place it there before Shabbos. And Tues understands Rashi that way, and the Gemara that, and the Mishnah that way. And so he says, well, of course I'm allowed to place it there before Shabbos. What the Mishnah should have said is that you're allowed to put it there before Shabbos. Why did it say if you put it there before Shabbos, mutter, it's allowed? There's another way to interpret the word lahanicha, to allow it to remain there. If I put it there before Shabbos, I'm allowed to continue keeping it there on Shabbos. And the Tosas Yontif explains that the concern there would be, perhaps I can't leave the vessel there into Shabbos, because if I do, I may come to use the oil, which is prohibited in use. And that's not a concern, and that's the meaning of the Mishnah. It's a problematic interpretation for many reasons, but nevertheless, the word in Rashi, lahanicha sham, could have two interpretations. But the simple meaning of the Mishnah is, I'm allowed to put a vessel there prior to Shabbos and keep it there through Shabbos to receive the vessel. But on Shabbos, I can't put it there. And I also may not benefit from the oil. And as we mentioned a few moments ago, even according to Rabbi Shimon, Tosas explains, who's very limited in his muktzah, will agree to this muktzah that I'm not allowed to use it because this is a muktzah machmas mitzvah. I've dedicated this to the mitzvah, and as long as the candle's lit, I cannot use it, and therefore it's going to be muktzah. We're going to get into in the next page about this concept of that once something is muktzah at the entrance of Shabbos, bein hashmashos, as Shabbos comes in, it is now muktzah for the entirety of Shabbos. We will see later concepts or questions about something that became muktzah in the middle of Shabbos, which is only going to be muktzah for the time that it's muktzah. But something that became muktzah, that was muktzah at the entrance of Shabbos, remains muktzah for the rest of Shabbos, even if the reason for the muktzah is no longer there. So, not a lot of benefit from this oil, because it is not prepared, meaning it's not of the oil that was set at the beginning of Shabbos for use. In fact, it was for non-use because it was dedicated to a mitzvah. So we're going to have now Rav Chisda's interpretation of our Mishnah. Even though our Mishnah teaches us essentially that I'm not allowed to put cushions beneath a chicken in order to receive the eggs so that the eggs don't crack upon being laid. But I am allowed to, once the egg has been laid, I'm allowed to put a vessel over it to protect it. Amar Rabba. So Rabba said, my time with Rav Chisda, what's the reasoning, the basis of Rav Chisda? He says, he's going to, the reason is because it is common for a chicken to lay the egg in garbage area and dirty area. And therefore, the laying egg outside of that area, it's not likely to put it in a place that's on an angle, on an incline. And therefore, you're allowed to do something to protect the egg in a common area, in a common thing, a common occurrence, and that's in the ashpa where somebody may step on it in the garbage area, and therefore you're allowed to put a vessel over it. But you're not allowed to put a vessel beneath it in an incline where it's going to roll down on it, because that's not a common occurrence. And to save something in an uncommon occurrence was not made permissible. They did not make it permissible. So essentially, you're not allowed to move a muktzah or a vessel for a muktzah unless it's a common occurrence, and the Chachamim allowed it on account of it being a common occurrence. So I'm going to ask the question about Tanya Nishbur Lechav Yishal Tevel. We have a case where, in Rashi's text, it says a barrel of tevel, untied, let's say wine. We have an untied wine in a barrel, and the barrel breaks. And now it's leaking. And if I don't get another vessel to save this, it's all going to leak out. But being tevel, I can't eat it on Shabbos, essentially making the contents of the barrel muktzah. Vatani nishbar lechavish tevel barush gaga on the top of his roof, maybe kliyum and yachtachta. He could bring a vessel and place it beneath it to receive the muktzah, the tevel, even though tevel essentially is not edible on Shabbos. Later, the Gemara is going to have an interpretation that says that it is not considered muktzah. But at this point, the way Rashi has it, we're talking about a tevel, which is going to be muktzah, untied produce, which I can't eat on Shabbos, and nevertheless, I'm allowed to bring a vessel to receive that leaking barrel. So when it says begulfi chadati, it's talking about a new barrel that has never been used, where those are likely to leak. An old barrel, you already know it's a good barrel, and so it's unlikely to leak. So you had no reason to assume that you need something there. By a new barrel is likely to leak, and as such, the Chachamim allowed for you to bring another vessel because that's going to be considered Hatzala Matsuya. It's going to be a saving of produce, which is Matsuya, which is likely to have happened on Shabbos. The Shchichi, the Paki, because those are common to break and leak. Esave, we ask another contradiction. In the next Mishnah, we're going to see that you're allowed to put a vessel beneath a flickering candle that sparks or bits of the wick are falling off and essentially creating a fire hazard. I'm allowed to put an earthenware vessel which is going to receive these sparks or these these little fires and as such protect the house. So Gemara says, so there too, I'm moving the vessel for a muktzah because those sparks are muktzah. Gemara says, no, that too is a common occurrence that you're going to have sparks coming off of your candles, and therefore it's permissible because it's a hatzala matsuya. It is a likely saving that's needed to be done. Now we're on Mem Gimel Amid Aleph at the top, 43a. So we have a contradiction. Kofin ka'ara al haner shlayachas b'kora. I'm allowed to put a bowl above a candle so that the ceiling or the beam above that candle not catch fire. So there too, that's not a hatzala matsuya. The Gemara says that, and I'm allowed to move a vessel for a muktzah. Again, the Gemara says babati gechini the shchichi. This is talking about the shchich buhu deleka. This is talking about little houses. The houses where the roof was very low, and it is likely to catch fire if I don't have something over it, and you forgot to do it before Shabbos. I'm allowed to take a vessel and put it there above to protect the ceiling. V'chein. Similarly, we have another halacha. The halacha is that if your cross beam in your house cracks and is beginning to cave in, I'm allowed to take a bed frame and turn it upright to support the caving beam. A cross beam that broke. I'm allowed to use a bench or the beams of a bed to place it beneath the cross beam in order to support it. So there too, the cross beam is a muktzah. It's already a part of a structure, and it's breaking. It's a broken vessel, which is going to be a new vessel. It's going to be a muktzah, and nevertheless, I'm allowed to take a vessel, a proper vessel, and move it on Shabbos for the muktzah, which you're just telling me you're not allowed to do. Again, so the Gemara says, no, this is something that is a common occurrence, and b'kashuri chadati davidi depaki. It's talking about a new crossbeam, and again, it has been untested, and therefore, those are likely to have a problem. And the Chachamim did not allowed for moving of a vessel for that kind of thing because it's a common occurrence, a common need of Hatzala of saving the day. What about this one? We also learn Nosnin Kli Tachas Adlaf B'Shabbos. You're allowed to put a vessel beneath a dripping ceiling. So you have your roof is leaking, and your ceiling is dripping water, and it's making a mess. So you want to take a vessel and put it there. Again, the water is assumingly going to be muksa because it's dirty, non-usable water, and you're putting a vessel there, and you're moving the vessel for a muksa item, the water. So, again, the Gemara says, you know what, we're talking about a common occurrence. It's new houses. The roof has not been tested. It's the first rain. So there it's common. And again, Hatzala Matsuya, the Chachamim allowed for this prohibition to be removed in a place where it's Hatzala Matsuya, where it is saving the day in something that is a common occurrence. So all of these cases, essentially, the concept going back to Rav Chisda is you're not allowed to move a vessel unless you're moving it for a non-muksa item. You cannot move a vessel for a muksa item. And we had a bunch of cases that you are allowed to move a vessel for to save something. And in each one of the cases, the Gemara says we're talking about it's a particular type of case where it's a common occurrence, that this would be a problem that happens. And as such, the Chachamim allowed for moving it. Hatzala Matsuya, in a common occurrence that needs saving, the Chachamim allowed for moving such a vessel. But in general, the concept still exists. You cannot move a vessel unless you're moving it for a mutter, a non-muksa item. Rav Yosef Amahaina time Rav Chisda. Rav Yosef says, no, the reason is based like this. Mishum dekamavatel kli mehechana. The reason why you're not allowed to put a pillow beneath an egg that's being laid, or beneath, in our Mishnah, the same thing, the reason is because you're nullifying the vessel from its usage. And by doing so, as we said, you're essentially making it permanent in its place. You're destroying the usability of the vessel, or you're just creating a muksa, which you're not allowed to do. So Abaye asked him a question. What about the case of tevel? You had the untithed produce, and we said that you're allowed to bring a vessel to save it from dripping out of a barrel. Wait, but the vessel is going to be servicing a muktzah item, essentially making the vessel itself muktzah, and you just said you're not allowed to be mavatel makli mechana. You're not allowed to make the vessel unusable. Amalei tevel muchanu etzel Shabbos. No, you're making a mistake. Tevel is actually non-muktzah for Shabbos. How so? But it's not really a usable item. So the Gemara says she'im ovar v'tikna metuken, and this is a shocking Gemara. The Gemara says because if somebody transgressed. Tues deals with whether intentionally or unintentionally, but if somebody transgressed and actually did tithe the produce, I'm allowed to eat it. And since it has a form of edibility on Shabbos, there is a way that I'm allowed to eat it on Shabbos. You cannot consider this a total muktzah item. And as such, even though I now have untithed wine dripping into this vessel, and essentially in the state that it is right now, I cannot use this vessel. But it has a scenario where I would be able to use this if somebody transgressed and did tithe it. I would be able to use the wine that is in that vessel. Essentially, the kli, the vessel that I'm putting underneath the broken barrel in order to receive the wine, is not permanently placed there. It is not entirely muksa, and as such, I'm allowed to bring it to save this wine. What about this one? It's the next mission that says I'm allowed to put a vessel beneath the sparks that are coming off of the candle. There, it's a muksa. And it says it's ein behen mamish. No, that's not a good proof at all. Not a good question, because there the sparks disintegrate in moments, so it's not going to remain a muktzah. It has no content. It falls in, and then within a moment it's burnt up. And so yes, it's true. For the moment that I put the vessel there until the spark completely dies, maybe I can't move the vessel, but that's not really creating a muktzah. That's not really removing the usability of this vessel, because it disappears in a moment. V'chein, what about this one? We said that you can move a bench to support a broken beam. You can use either a bench or a bed to put it upright to support a broken beam. There, I'm removing the usability of the bed or bench at that moment. So the Gemara says, no, the Rafi, the Iboy Shakile. We're talking about that it's only put in there, in a weak form that I could essentially take it out at this point. I'm only protecting it that if it collapses anymore, that it won't completely collapse the house. It'll be there to support it. But in the state that I put the bench there now, it actually is still removable, and so I haven't yet removed the usability. And that when it does happen, it's going to happen on its own. What about the next halacha that we on Nosikli Tachas Adlaf b'Shabbos? You're putting a bucket beneath a drip in order to receive the water, and over there you're going to make the bucket remain there for the rest of Shabbos, and that's a problem. The Gemara says, "B'delaf haroi," which is talking about that the drip is actually water that is usable. It's not dirty water, and therefore I'm allowed to put it there, implying that indeed, if it was water that you could not really use for anything on Shabbos, that it would be problematic to put a bucket there, which obviously has a very practical issue. You have an air conditioner that's dripping into the house. You have a drip coming from some leak, and you want to put a bucket there. And so how can you put the bucket there? Probably the water is not usable. So first of all, the water could be usable to clean a spill. But there's another concept that we'll see, that there's a concept of graf shel rei. Graf shel rei is loosely, the concept is that if I have a vessel that is going to be disgusting, I'm allowed to move, even if it's a muksa, I'm allowed to move it. Classic case is garbage cans. I'm allowed to move a garbage that's disgusting in its place, even though that garbage is muksa. It has no use, and it's really disgusting. I have no use for it on Shabbos, but I'm allowed to move it because it's in a place that's disgusting. That is the concept of a graf shel rei. So if I have a puddle occurring, so that itself would be a graf shel rei, but the vessel that I put there, in order to receive the drip, the permissibility of that, putting the vessel there, even though that I'm essentially, while it's dripping, I'm going to make the vessel muktzah, because all the water coming in, we're not going to drink or use the water that drips from a leaking roof into a bucket. Nevertheless, I'm allowed to put it there is because essentially it's going to become a graf shel rei at some point. It's going to be disgusting where it is, and I'm going to move the water away from there, either when it starts filling up the bucket and I'm afraid it's going to overflow, or just when it starts becoming like dirty and smelly, I'm going to empty it out and put the bucket back there. So essentially, since there is going to be a situation in some way that on Shabbos I'm going to be allowed to move that bucket, therefore I'm allowed to put it there. But we need an explanation, because according to what the Gemara is saying right now, you're not allowed to put a vessel in a place that I'm not going to be able to move it on Shabbos and make it a muksa. And that's what's going to happen when you put it underneath a drip. Unless, as the Gemara says over here, it's going to be drinkable water. Or another reason, another thing that Gemara said, it could have said, is where it becomes a graf shel rei, it'll become disgusting, and I'm allowed to move the vessel. Another halacha. What about what we saw, that kofin asal lefnei afrochim sheyalav yerdu? I'm allowed to take a basket. So the Kuttners donated my chicks a little basket, woven, and they put not actually, because I don't have little chickens, but I'm sure they would. Yeah, and if I had chickens, and I put the basket down there for the little chicks to hop on and off, and it's all nice and sweet. Essentially, when I put it in front of the chickens are going to hop on it, and being that the animal is muktzah, the vessel is now muktzah and stationary in its place, and it's going to be a problem. How can I put it there? And yet the Mishnah says I'm allowed to put it there. The Gemara says kasava mutal taltalit. I'm allowed to. It says I'm allowed to move the bucket. And where says, what are you talking about? But Tanya also talked about the Brisa says that I'm not allowed to move the bucket. That's right. But that's only when the chicks are on the basket. I can't actually move the basket. But once they are off, I'm allowed to. But Tanya but it says that even if they're not on there, I'm not allowed to move it. And where it says, Amar Rabbi Abo, but Oiden Olav Kol Ben Hashmoshes, that brisa that says I'm not allowed to move the basket, even when the chicks are not on the basket, that's only if they were on the basket the entire beginning of Shabbos and Ben Hashmoshes. Since at the beginning of Shabbos, this vessel was muktzah, it remains muktzah for the rest of Shabbos. I mentioned earlier this idea that once Shabbos comes in and there's a vessel at the beginning of Shabbos that was muktzah, that remains muktzah for the rest of Shabbos. However, the case that the Gemara is talking about is that Shabbos morning, I take a basket and I put it in front of the chicks to hop on them, and they hop on and they hop off. When they're off, I'm allowed to move the vessel because at that point, it was not muktzah at the beginning of Shabbos. True that when the chicks jump on it, it is muktzah, but it doesn't remain muktzah once they're off. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak said, "Kashem she'enosim kli tachas hatarnagolos lekaba beitzasa, kach ein kofen lekli b'shvil shalei teshaveh." Rabbi Yitzchak said, just as I'm not allowed to take a vessel to receive the eggs that are being laid from the chicken, so too I'm not allowed to put a vessel over it in order to protect the chicken. The Gemara says, not like what Rav Chisda said earlier. So what's the idea? The idea is I'm not allowed to take a vessel unless I'm allowed to move the item. And since I'm not allowed to move since I'm not allowed to move the vessel, since I'm not allowed to move the egg, I'm also not allowed to move the vessel to protect the egg. Well, we asked all the questions that we just saw, the question about the dripping wine from a broken barrel, that I'm allowed to put a vessel beneath it to catch it, and the catching the drip in our Mishnah, and catching the putting the vessel over the candle to protect the ceiling, and the collapsed crossbeam, all these questions. And he answered, yeah, all of these cases are talking about a concept in muktzah. The halacha is that once I already have something in my hand, even though I'm not supposed to pick it up, but if I did, then I'm allowed to put it wherever it needs to be. So this vessel, let's take the bench. I'm not allowed to take the bench unless I'm using it for something that I'm allowed to move it. But once I need its place, the bench is in the way, and I need to move it anyhow, so I pick it up in order to move it, I'm already allowed to, at that point, once it's in my hands, I'm allowed to take it to where it needs to be, and in this case, that's to support the collapsing beam. Tashema. Achas beis hashanol b'Shabbos, v'achas beis hashanol b'Yontiv. Come in here, this idea. The Brisa says, regardless of egg was born, it was laid on Shabbos or it was laid on Yontif, ein metaltalin lo lechasas ba'as akli v'lismach as kareba karamita. I'm not allowed to move this egg. It's muktzah. I can't use it. If I want to put the egg on top of a jug in order to cover the jug, I lost the cap to my bottle and I need to cover it. So I'm going to take an egg, newly laid egg, just now on Shabbos, and I'm going to put it on top of the jar in order to cover it. Can't do that. My bed is lost part of its leg, and I want to put the egg there to support it, as well known in a certain angle. If you know how to do it, the egg will support itself and support quite a bit of weight. So I want to do that. So I can't do that because the egg is muktzah. But the Brisa says, but I may take a vessel and put it on top to protect it. And you, Rav Yitzchak, just said that I'm not allowed to on account of that I can only use a vessel for what it's used for a permissible use. And where it says, there too, if I need the place where the egg is, and the egg was laid in the middle of my dining room and I need to be able to walk there, so I'm going to pick it up and move it. Once I'm moving it, I'm already allowed to use it to protect it. I'm allowed to use, once I'm allowed to move the vessel, not the egg. The egg wasn't in my dining room. The vessel is in a place that I need in my dining room. There's a pot on the floor. I'm going to pick it up to move it. Once I'm allowed to move it, I'm going to put it over the egg to protect the egg. Tashema. We have a brisa. We're going to try and prove the concept from here. I have rocks, stones that I need to use for building after Shabbos, and I want to protect them from a rain. So I'm going to throw a mat over it. Now the rocks are muktzah, And yet it says I'm allowed to take a mat and throw it over these rocks to protect them on Shabbos. So again, the Gemara says, no, we're not talking about building rocks. That Bryce is talking about Ba'avanim Kurzolas, the Chazan Beis HaKisei. These were, they used to use stones for cleaning themselves after a bowel movement. And so these stones were particularly shaped stones that were easy for usage, and they were designated for the bathroom. And as such, they're not muksa on Shabbos because they had a designated use. Tashema, well, what about this brisa? You explain that brisa away that it's not talking about building stones. It's talking about stones for a bathroom. But there's a brisa that says so about bricks, and bricks are obviously not used for a bathroom. Tashema, you have bricks that were that essentially you probably want to use them for building, and it says you're allowed to take a mat and throw it over to protect it from the rain. So again, you see, even though that the bricks are not movable on Shabbos, I'm allowed to go and move another permissible item, even though I'm bringing it for the usage of and the purpose of a non-usable muksa item. So Gemara says here too, the ishtayer mibinyana. These are leftover bricks. These are not the bricks prior to building. These are the remaining cinder blocks that are left after the building. What are those used? Those are used for function around the house. You use them as a doorstop. You use them for kids to sit on. So therefore, it actually is something that is usable on Shabbos. The ishtayer mibinyana, it's leftovers from a building. The chazil lemezgeh, it's made to sit on. Okay, so what about this brisa? Tashema, I'm allowed to take a mat and throw it over a beehive. So I'm a beekeeper, and I have these drawers that I made as my beehives, and I'm going to take a mat and I'm going to throw it over to protect it. Whether it's b'chama b'nei chama, whether it's in the summer in order to protect it from the sun, or b'gshamim b'nei geshamim, or in the winter to protect it from rain, I'm allowed to throw a mat over. But you have to not make sure that you don't intend to trap the bees in there, because that's going to be a problem of tzeda, of trapping, which is one of the 39 principal malachas of Shabbos. So the Gemara is going to analyze soon about this concept of trapping. But for now, the question is, how can you say that you're allowed to move a mat for a beehive? The beehive is muksa on Shabbos because it has no usage for Shabbos, and since it has no usage on Shabbos, so it's muksa. And yet the Brisa says I'm allowed to take a mat and move it for a non-usable item, for a non-movable item. The Gemara says no. Here too, the beehive is movable because in my beehive I have honey, and so I open those drawers to get some honey. There's honey in the beehive, and therefore I'm using it for the honey. So it's a movable item, and as such, I'm allowed to move the mat to protect another movable item. Okay, part of the brisa would work because it says in the summer to protect it from the sun. In the summer, there's honey in the beehive. Now we turn the page to Mem Gimel Amud Beis. However, the ikadvash, but in the winter, where there's no honey in there, the lekadvash, there's no honey. Michael and Mema, what are you going to talk about? How do you explain that it says in the brisa I'm allowed to move the mat to protect the beehive in the winter from the rain? In the winter, there's no honey. No, there is honey. Even though that in the summer you take out all the excess honey, a beekeeper is always going to keep at least 2 rows of honey, 2 honeycombs full of honey for the bees themselves to reproduce and have what to eat. And therefore, there's even in the winter, there's going to be honey there. Gemara says, great, but then it's not for you. It's not usable honey. And again, your concept is you can only move a mat or any vessel for something that's not muksa, for something that I can move on Shabbos. But if you're telling me in the winter I can do that as well to protect it from rain, and you're telling me in the winter the only honey that's there is the honey that the bees need for themselves, well, then that's not edible. And then again, that's going to be muktzah. And so the brisa, which says that I can move the mat to protect the honeycomb in the winter, is essentially saying I can move a vessel for the protection or the usage for a non-movable item on Shabbos. Well, muktzah is menu. So Gemara says, no, even those honeycombs are not going to be muksa. The chashav alayu, he thought about them before Shabbos in order to eat some of it. He says, you know what? I'm going to need teas the Shabbos. I'm going to need some honey in the tea. On Shabbos, we're going to go out and get some honey from the honeycomb. So anyway, it says, what? So you're telling me if he did not think about it, then it's going to be prohibited. If he didn't intend before Shabbos to use some of the honey, then he's not allowed to protect the honey, the honeycomb, the beehive, with these mats. Well, then the Mishnah is making a distinction. And the Mishnah says it's permissible in scenario A, but not in scenario B. What's the scenarios? The Mishnah says you're allowed to put the mat on if you don't intend to trap, but you may not put it on if you intend to trap. Well, then the Mishnah should have made a greater and even more important distinction. It should have said if you intend to eat some of the honeycomb, if you intended before Shabbos to eat some of the honeycomb, then you're allowed to put the mat on, and if not, then you're not allowed to protect it because it's all muksa. Why didn't the Brisa make a distinction within itself? And that's only if you intended before Shabbos to eat some of the honey. But if you did not, then you're not allowed to cover the honeycomb, and you're not allowed to protect it from the rain. And since the Brisa did not make that distinction, it would seem to be that the Brisa is saying that even though you have no intention of eating this, regardless of whether you intend to eat the honey or not, you're allowed to protect it. And that would be a contradiction to Rabbi Yitzchak, who said that you're only allowed to move a vessel for a usable item. The Gemara says no, that's not a good proof. The Brisa actually didn't make that distinction because it wanted to tell us a more important distinction. It wanted to tell us the distinction of that you're not allowed to trap. Even if you intended to eat some of the honey, but you're not allowed to put it on in a manner that's going to trap the bees. And that's an important thing because Mani, whose opinion is this? Rabbi Shimon, if it's the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who cares if you're going to trap? As we've seen, Rabbi Shimon says, Meleches machshavas asar Torah. In Shabbos, it has to be an intentional act. This is not going to be intentional because your intention is to protect the bees. If it happens to also trap them, so be it. It's not absolutely going to happen, it would seem. Right? There's a discussion in the Farshim of whether this is a absolute, because anytime we know that anything is an absolute, that it's going to happen, a pasik ratio, so then it doesn't make a difference whether you intend or not. So from the fact the Gemara says that if he would intend or not intend, seems that it's not absolutely going to trap it. It just has to mean that he doesn't intend to trap it. So Rabbi Shimon, if it's Rabbi Shimon, Leslie Muksa, well, he doesn't follow the idea of Muksa at all, right? As we said, he doesn't think that the beehive, the honeybee, the honeycombs, or the moving of a vessel is going to be Muksa. Rabbi Yehuda, so it must be you're saying that it's Rabbi Yehuda who is concerned with Muksa. Okay. According to Rabbi Yehuda, who cares whether you intend to trap the bees or don't intend to trap the bees? That's only a distinction according to Rabbi Shimon, as we said, because Rabbi Shimon says that you have to have intent in your action. But Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with Rabbi Shimon in regards to Muksa, also disagrees with him in regards to intent. And he says, regardless of whether you intend to trap or don't intend to trap, you're chayav if you do it. It's going to be prohibited in any case. The Rabbi Yehuda, the Gemara says you're right. Nevertheless, we're talking about an opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who does have the concept of muksa. And even though normally we say that it doesn't make a difference whether he intends or not, over here the Brisa says intent. But you know what it means? It doesn't mean don't intend. What it means is don't do it in a manner that will be exacting, and therefore it's going to trap the bees. But rather do it in a manner that it's a little bit open in one corner, open in another side, and therefore the bees are not trapped in it. So that they don't become trapped by themselves. But indeed, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it doesn't make a difference whether you intend or not, or rather what the Brisa means is don't do it in such a manner that it is likely to happen. Rav Ashi says, no, your whole question about this brisa, winter, summer, there's no honey in the summer, there's no honey in the winter, is not not a good question, because we don't mean summer and winter. You know what the brisa means when it says in the summer for the sun and in the winter because of the rain, that you're protecting the beehive? Not in the days of rain, but because of the rain. And that could be in the spring, where there's already honey in the honeycombs, but there's also rains. Or in the sun, it doesn't mean specifically midsummer. It could be even in the fall, but there's sun and there's still honeycombs. There's rain, there's sun, and in both of those cases, in the spring and the fall, there's honey in the honeycomb. Amar Luhu Rav Sheshes said, Puku, go out, va'amr leila Rav Yitzchak, go tell Rav Yitzchak, kvar tirgama Rav Huna l'shmaitech b'Bavel. Rav Huna explained your halacha in Bavel, this idea that you said that ein kli nitel ela l'tzarech davar nitel, that you're only allowed to take a vessel for the need and for the purpose of another vessel that is also allowed to be used, but you're not allowed to move it. If you can't move what your intent is for, you can't move the vessel that's going to be servicing it. The Amar Rav Huna, because Rav Huna said this, a deceased person is muktzah. And Rav Huna said, you're not allowed to move a mat to protect a deceased person. So you can't bring a mat to place underneath somebody who passed away on Shabbos, and you can't put something over them to protect them. So somebody passed away outside in the field. There's nothing you can do. So what should you do? You bring it for a living person. Mahi, how do you do that? The Amar of Shmuel Rabbi Yehuda v'Chentana Shila Mari, because they taught this. Meisa mutal b'chama. You have a deceased person, he's laying out in the sun. Two people come and they sit at his side. And they sit on the ground, and now the ground's hot from the sun. So they come and they bring a mat beneath them. And they bring a bed and they sit on it. And each one brings their own bed to sit on, their own cot, their own bench. Now it's hot above. A person alin. So they bring a mat and they hold it up in the air to protect themselves. Now that becomes very hard to do. You're holding it up for too long. And so then, and then each one takes their bench that they're sitting on and they stand it up to hold up the mat, and that's going to be protection from the sun for this deceased person. This way the mechitza is made by itself. And this comes into a concept of binyan. When you have an oel arai, a temporary structure, it's not a permanent structure, so that is also going to be within the malacha of bona, of building. There's going to be a prohibition, darabanan, of building a oel arai, a temporary structure. However, if I did it in an abnormal way, where instead of building the walls first, the supports first, and then the top, instead what I do is I build the top and then bring the supports, it's going to be permissible to do in such a case, l'tzorach, for the need of the mace. The Chacham said, so what you're going to do is you're going to bring the mat, and then you're going to bring, then you're going to stand up your bench to support the mat, and this way you did the top before the sides and before the supports, and it's going to be permissible. Now, why do you need all of this? Why don't you just bring the vessel, the mat, and protect put it over the deceased to protect him from the sun? So from the fact that you needed to go to this length to do it, it tells us that you can't move the vessel because ein kli nitel el tzarech davar nitel. I can't take the mat because it's coming to service a deceased. I can't do that. I can only bring the mat in order to service the living person. Tomorrow we'll continue with other versions of what to do with someone who's deceased, how to actually be allowed to bring him in and not to stay outside. But according to this, Rav Huna interpreted Rav Yitzchak's halacha of ein kli nitel ela l'tzarech davar nitel, that you can only bring a vessel, even a permissible, something that you're allowed to move. You're not allowed to move it unless you're moving it for something else that it's permissible to you to move. If it's servicing a non-muktzah item, I can move it. If it's coming to use to service a muktzah item, as in this case it would be a deceased person, I'm not allowed to bring it. Tomorrow morning.